Morning. So, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock last night, as most of you probably already know. So, just my reaction to it. From a professional standpoint, I've heard some discussion about whether or not the police have to or need to have a cooperative victim to make an arrest. The short answer is no. Functionally, they usually will, right? So that is to say, if Chris Rock went and found the LAPD and told them, hey, I was assaulted or I was physically harassed or whatever the California analog is, and I want to press charges, then the police would go conduct an investigation and likely make an arrest just based on what we know of the video. But they don't have to have Chris Rock come find them and do that. And just based on the video alone, they could probably charge Will Smith with a crime. But ultimately, if Chris Rock's not going to cooperate with the investigation because he doesn't want to make a complaint, then the DA is not going to run with it, right? If Chris Rock's not going to be a cooperative victim, then why would the DA try to bring it before a jury and prove, beyond a reasonable doubt that some sort of harassment took place, right? Or again, whatever the California analog is, right? Now, there are situations where the police will make an arrest in those circumstances or similar-ish circumstances, even though a conviction is unlikely because of an uncooperative victim. And this actually came up last night, and I had a newer officer dealing with an incident of domestic violence, and as far as he could tell, it was just physical harassment between the husband and the wife, and they both had marks on them. I don't need to get too into the weeds of what happened, but bottom line, we couldn't prove some sort of assault with injury, so there was no mandatory domestic violence arrest as is required in Oregon statute, and so it's a discretionary arrest, right? That the officer had probable cause to believe that one or both of them had put their hands on each other and had an idea of who the primary aggressor was, but the wife wasn't really cooperative with the investigation, didn't really want to make a complaint, and there was no obvious physical injury beyond just some slight redness on her face, and so talking to this newer officer, I had to kind of explain and remind him, and just because he is still new, that there are times when we will make that harassment arrest in the case of domestic violence, where we're trying to protect the potential domestic violence victim from ongoing abuse by requiring physical separation between parties, by taking one or in some cases both to jail, right? If you've got mutual harassment, and you can't really determine a primary aggressor, and they're both belligerent, and they refuse to separate, then you can make a discretionary arrest for physical harassment and charge both parties, and take them both to jail and make them have a cooling down period to where they're apart from each other, and ultimately, right, we've got a responsibility to make sure that folks are safe, right? And that when we walk away from a situation, we're not going to come back and have to do the murder investigation afterwards. So yes, I would to circle all the way, come full circle. You could have a scenario where Will Smith is arrested, but what are you accomplishing by that, right? And in the case of the domestic violence, like I said, the DA is probably going to look at that see uncooperative victim and not prosecute the case just based on the fact that the victim doesn't want to make a complaint, and so that's where you can run into the situation where you have an arrest and no prosecution and eventual conviction, right? And arrest ends up just being a tool to kind of put a band-aid on the problem, such as it is. So, and people, I think, don't really have a good understanding of that as well. Like, when the police arrest somebody, you hear about people being perp walked, or, in high-profile cases, they get walked out in handcuffs in front of a camera. And if you ever watch, like, Cops, they have this admonition at the beginning of the show. It's like, anybody arrested is, innocent until proven guilty. And that's how our system works, right? And so people, see cops putting people in handcuffs and giving Miranda warnings and things like that. And the cops are not judge, jury, and executioner. We're not meant to be. Obviously, there's extreme situations where, deadly force is going to be reasonable and justified. But, barring that, the cops are putting somebody in handcuffs. They're investigators, they're fact finders, right? They come, they do an investigation, they try to suss out what happened because they weren't there, and all that is required to make an arrest is probable cause. I think I've talked about that before, but the definition of probable cause in Oregon is a substantial objective basis to believe that more likely than not, the person being arrested committed the crime, right? And so the shorthand for that, the more likely than not, right, is 51%. Is it more likely than not that this person did this? And it's actually a fairly low bar to meet for an arrest, especially, if you're talking about like mandatory arrest that is, statutory required, if you have probable cause for, assault, strangulation, menacing, that sort of, domestic violence related crime in Oregon. It doesn't take a lot to get to that 51% level, right? That you've got to have some kind of evidence. That's where the substantial objective basis comes in, right? But still, substantial objective basis to believe that more likely than not, right? That on balance, the available evidence tends to lean one way, gets you to an arrest, which is an entirely different standard than what's required for a conviction, right? And so the arrest is the beginning of a legal process, and then a trial is kind of the conclusion, or if there's a conviction, sentencing is the conclusion of the process. And to get a conviction, people watch court dramas, you'll know that you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Which is a much higher standard of evidence to get to if you want to make it, if you want to get a conviction, right? And so at that point, you have to close the door on plausible alternate theories to explain what happened, right? And so a good investigator is going to keep an eye towards that. And in something as cut and dry as Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, I mean, there's not a whole lot in the way of alternative theories that are plausible, but even then, like, a good investigator is going to have to do some work. I mean, because you've already got probable cause, right? You know more likely than not Will Smith lost his temper, or got cajoled into assaulting or harassing Chris Rock by his wife. Who knows? But you've already got probable cause that something happened, something criminal, right? But to get a conviction, to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Will Smith, whatever the elements of the crime are, if we're talking about harassment, then engaged in offensive physical contact, again, or whatever the analogous statute is in California, or assault, right? Actually inflicted some kind of injury. Again, my context is Oregon, so in Oregon, physical injury would be substantial pain or impairment of the bodily function of something. So like if Chris Rock's got significant pain, like his jaw hurts, it hurts to talk, right? Then you've got injury. Even if nothing's necessarily broken, that would be more like serious physical injury. But a good investigator, looking at not just an arrest, but potentially trying to obtain a conviction, is going to think about plausible alternative theories about what occurred. And there's been some speculation about this being like a staged event. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I didn't watch it live, but I've seen some clips of it, and by all accounts, Chris Rock, he was clearly jarred, and it took him a little bit of time to kind of gather himself. He rolled with it fairly well, and the show must go on, I guess. But some people want to say, well, the Oscars, the ratings have been down substantially over the last few years, and obviously this is no such thing as bad press, and so all this is generating quite a bit of buzz, and maybe Will Smith could make an argument in court that, well, no, actually this was something prearranged, and we were asked to do this by X, Y, and Z person, and maybe you can scrounge up a supporting witness to say, oh yes, we talked about this and this was going to happen, and maybe it just he was supposed to pull the slap a little bit and hit Chris Rock too hard, and now he's butthurt about getting slapped in the face on national television, and everybody thinks he's a wuss or something. I mean, is that likely? Probably not, but is it a plausible alternative theory? If yes, then that makes it more difficult to obtain a conviction. So if you're a good investigator, what you have to keep an eye towards is if that's a potential defense, right? This was planned, this was staged. You're gonna have to actually do a lot of work, do a lot of interviews with all the people who had contact with Chris Rock that night or Will Smith, and close the door on that potential defense, right? And try to establish that there was no, pre-planned event, for publicity or whatever, or think about whatever other kind of plausible alternative theories. I mean, there's not a whole lot because it was on video and the whole world saw it now, but it's kind of how you have to look at a criminal investigation. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. It'll be funny to see what Chris Rock's take is on all this, if he makes public comment on it later, or if Will Smith apologizes, or I don't know, we'll see. But the memes are great, right? Inspiring and uplifting as always. It's been fun. See you next time.